reestablishing my relationship with creation and with the universe. So it has meaning. Like everything I do has meaning just because I invest into that relationship and I look for it. And I feel more validated than I ever have in my life because I prioritize that relationship. So I think that's what, in a roundabout way, what I was kind of getting at is like in your endeavors, if you're looking for meaning, if you're looking to find your place and your space of like authenticity, just whatever feels important, prioritize that, ceremonialize it, like make it, drape it however you want that makes you feel fancy and it makes you feel good, like, and then it'll just continue, it'll just evolve and snowball, and like you'll just feel more confident and you will find a greater voice within that exploration and things will fall into place.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Yo, what's up? This is BOHO HOBO, and we welcome you all back to Bindlism, a philosophy to a self-sufficient lifestyle. The purpose of Bindlism is to unlock authentic perspective as we create a community of like-minded individuals who are living a self-sufficient lifestyle. A self-sufficient lifestyle is one in which a human being is activating their self-awareness to curate an authentic life that keeps them sustained mentally, emotionally, and physically in their adventure towards self-fulfillment. BOHO HOBO's mission is to support a community that fosters this culture. We will be interviewing a diverse group of people, including artists, creatives, entrepreneurs, and independent thinkers to make this happen. Please join us in this journey as we explore the world and broaden our horizons with discoveries of new perspective. Thank you to everyone who is taking the time to stop by on your journey to give us a listen. We hope you enjoy, and as always, explore endlessly. And we're live. Bindlism, a philosophy to a self-sufficient lifestyle. Episode 54 with Chloe Flores.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a little while since since we've done a podcast. Not to get into the specifics or anything, but let's just say coronavirus makes things very difficult to exist right now. But we're making it happen anyways. In the time that we've been gone, Kyle and I have acquired all this new mic setup, so we're hoping this will improve the podcast experience for everyone. Yeah, so Chloe,
Also, before we get into the podcast, just a disclaimer. Chloe Flores lives at the Gear Factory with us. So
on the 5th floor.
COVID precautions, we're all safe.
Yeah.
This is going to be a dope podcast.
It's gonna be sick. Yeah, so Chloe, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone, kind of give them a little synopsis of like who you are, what you do, and then we can kind of get into it from there.
Sure. So I moved into the Gear Factory in September. I am a graphic artist. I paint. I'm a tattoo artist. I am also really interested in language and shared stories. So I am here because I'm interested in starting a podcast of my own, and obviously in interacting with both of you as well. And I'm really excited to just start to participate on this version of a platform and of expression, because I really try not to limit myself in terms of how I can share my thoughts and my experience. So,
have you ever been on a podcast before?
No.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I feel like that's pretty common. Most of the people that we interview have never been on one before.
Still up and coming.
Yeah.
Whether it's entrepreneurship, artist, painter, music, whatever it may be. We're pretty underground when we have guests come on, which is good,
Yeah. No, and that's something I'm really just interested in, the ability of a podcast to preserve these really important and dynamic conversations that we're having, not just to share, that is really important and beautiful, but for our own integration of information as well.
Yeah.
And it's community development too at its core.
Yeah. It's nice
networking.
It's just nice to get into because I feel like people come to a podcast, especially if they've never been in one before, and I don't know, I guess maybe you can shed light on this after, but a lot of people come in, they're very nervous, especially because like you obviously know who we are, but a lot of people come in, they've never met us outside of a DM.
Right.
So they're like, I don't know who these guys are.
Right.
Like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. So it's very unique. It's a unique place to get people out of their comfort zone. And by the end, they just are always like, holy crap, this is so cool. Like I feel like I know you guys now. So
yeah.
But I guess like, how do you feel coming into a podcast?
Well, I am a huge conversationalist. I absolutely love just conversing and sharing on like a spectrum of levels, whether it be like a really friendly exchange or like a highly intense, like, you know, debate. So I've always been really comfortable with like framing my ideas and sharing them and then receiving others. So I feel, even though I haven't like sat in front of a microphone and, you know, recorded my conversations, very often I'm like, damn, I wish I had a microphone to record my conversations. So
Kyle's always doing that. He
Yeah.
just like pulls his phone out.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad that you feel like comfortable coming in, and it'll be good. So you mentioned that you want to start a podcast. I might as well like talk about that to start because it's interesting. So I guess what made you want to start a podcast, and also I guess what is the concept in which you're trying to put out there? Sure,
yeah. So I'm wanting to start a podcast with Cassandra, who also lives here at the Gear Factory, and I think basically like we were just having these really amazing and charged conversations, like packed with epiphanies and revelations and just like yeah and like, so we kept saying like, damn, we need a podcast. And then at some point it's like, okay, how much of that like intention setting is just like vain, and how much of it are you actually going to bring into fruition? Because like we have the ability to do that innately, we have power. So, and that's basically what our conversations are usually about, is like knowing our power, resolving when we feel like we don't have it, and then moving forward and integrating like, how can I, in whatever the context is, like how can I ground myself and like know that in, you know, like for instance, we talk a lot about like self-actualization and education.
Which I feel is left out a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something we talk about for sure.
Yeah, and I've noticed that. I mean, absolutely. It's and like self-empowerment, but you know, that's become a buzzword, which is unfortunate, but you know, it's absolutely necessary to reestablish, you know, our relationship with ourselves, especially in this context of absolute chaos culturally, societally. So that, you know, we can begin to redefine our power and then our relationship with everything externally. So we talk about that in a spectrum of different things, which is kind of brings it to the name of the podcast. So we're definitely very spiritually engaged just by nature. And Cassandra, in one of our first conversations, she was telling me about the Hopi people, which are in southwestern America here. It's like New Mexico, Arizona area. And they're actually thought to be like one of the oldest peoples of in the world. And they basically have this prophecy. I'm not sure exactly when the prophecy was made. I've heard claims that it's less than legitimate. I think symbols don't necessarily always have to be, you know, rooted in like complete accuracy to still hold meaning. So the prophecy basically talks about like the way to the new world, the green world that we want to see, is basically providing a space for all spectrum and walks of life and belief systems. And it words it in a very beautiful and poetic way, but basically the rainbow warriors, spectrum of people that offer a spectrum of perspectives. And we love rainbows anyway. So we were like, oh, the rainbow podcast. Like, let's call those warriors. Yeah. Like, let's.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's basically
cool.
where we're starting from.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I guess what would be the concept behind it, I guess. So the reason I ask is when Kyle and I started our podcast, we had no real direction.
Mm-hmm.
We just knew that we had good conversations and we're like, we need to just have a podcast, similar to what you're saying about you and Cassandra. But we found out after like, I don't know, 10 episodes is that we were just kind of talking to talk, but we needed to bring some sort of intention to the podcast to just, keep it fresh every episode. So that's when we really switched over to interviewing people because we're bringing a new perspective in every episode. So,
totally. Yeah.
Our perspectives may stay the same relatively, but it just creates a completely different dynamic every time.
Totally. So, yeah.
That was kind of like our X factor, but I guess I'm curious to know like what your intentions are for your podcast and like what you want the people to get out of it, I guess.
Totally. Absolutely. I think ultimately something that I've realized is that we all sort of ride the same wave energetically. So when I'll have a conversation with one person and then within 24 hours be talking organically on the same subject with however many other people. So that being said, I think if there is something that is a topic that is really relevant to my experience presently, like that, I'm sure that topic and subject is relevant to others. Not by like any vain assumption, but just because we are all connected. And so I think like initially, and obviously like, yeah, we're very green to this sort of format, but initially our structure was going to be based around like, what are we currently grappling with? And then how do we educate ourselves? What information are we bringing on for ourselves and the reader and the listener to find more power within that conflict or struggle? And so we kind of wanted to create like a journey where like, it's not just like, oh, these are the things we know. It's like, oh no, these are the things we want to know. We're reading this, we're, listening to this, we're learning, any number of information, bringing it in and then trying to integrate it while also having like we've talked about, having definitely bringing people on the show that offer new perspectives that we'd like to learn about and integrate into our own lives, but also like having little segments. Like we joked about having like, because Cassandra and I are totally like reflect one another almost completely. So it's an echo chamber, right? And so we were like exiting, the echo, chamber. And then like, I don't know, have like Cam on where he's like, and then we're like, oh, damn, like but it's valuable to have someone that challenges your perspective.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
that's definitely a good point. And I definitely think we've had a few that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on like a lot of things, but we find that middle ground in like the general like themes of like what we're talking about. So it's definitely cool to just like broaden your perspective on like whatever thing you're or like say it's a challenge that you're talking about. I don't know, whatever it may be. And you two have like a very specific approach about what you want to do, and this other person's been battling it a different way, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't even like think about coming at it that way.
Totally, yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm super inspired by. So part of what is really fascinating to me about going back to the prophecy, the rainbow prophecy, is that we're all like specialization is absolutely key to life on Earth. Like we are multi-celled organism. Each cell has a very specific job that it fulfills, a very specific interest, and that is absolutely necessary for us to be walking, engaging organisms. Otherwise, we would just be single-celled organisms. And so evolution is contingent on specialization. So that being said, like my interests, like acutely, do not have to match someone else's, but they're still valuable, and that other person's are still super valuable. So I'm really interested in reestablishing my relationship with source. I think people of indigeneity have an absolute, timeless wisdom in terms of their engagement with the earth and with what I like to say is source. Source to me is God. Like,
right. I get it.
And in terms of the rainbow tribe, what was source for them?
The Hopi people. So they are an animist, like pagan culture and people. They are in the desert. So I'm currently still educating myself on like pan Native American and pan indigenous archetypes and symbology. But usually there are like patterns that sort of like play across all of like indigenous experience, and that's like pan Native American peoples refer to it as like the great mystery, and that's basically like
the mystery is that they're all interconnected in some way,
or like what is the meaning of life, what is the what is the stuff, the great mystery, right? And just like relinquishing control, and like it is the great mystery, and then there are deities that permeate, like with any people, like oral tradition, there are ways to explain like why does the sun rise and why does the moon, and and where does the rain come from and why isn't it raining, and like all that stuff, but to make sense of our human experience, but that connection to the earth, to land, to water is really important, and the connection to spirit is one that we've lost. And so I am personally really interested in uplifting indigenous wisdom, educating myself, and then sharing that with others, amplifying indigenous voices. My last name's Flores. I'm amalgamation of many different, ancestral backgrounds, but I do have Mesoamerican Native ancestry that I have no relationship with. So I'm trying to, I feel called, exactly. I feel called to get back to that. And I feel like that is where like my power is. So
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And doing it in a way that's modernized through podcast form. I think that's empowering too. And we are having this, I think, underground wave of more spirituality arising in our generation. So yeah, riding that wave, I think it's important and super cool that we're a part of it.
Right.
I think it's powerful, and I'm sure there's other, maybe not specifically talking about that group of people and their ideologies and philosophies, but like just the idea of like spirituality. I'm sure there's plenty of other podcasts kind of doing similar things, but it's cool to add that perspective. But I think to hit on what you're saying about like why there's kind of this loss of connection with spirituality is really just like technology advancing so far that we kind of have become more disconnected from reality, because we just live in this like virtual world all the time. And it's just so easy for people to not care about like the earth and what's actually happening. So I think it's very powerful to bring that back into the forefront and get people to like realize that there is more.
And like you were saying that like technology is kind of disconnecting us from spirituality, but if we put spirituality on the thing that's disconnecting, then it's reintegrated. Reintegration.
I think
I think people are in that space, so it's not necessarily about taking them out of that space, but more just using the tool of that space to guide their attention towards something important,
because it is at the end of the day a tool.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And adaptation to any context, like that's how we evolve, right? We are living, and this is also interesting. I've been reading about, we're living in unprecedented times. Obviously, like the scale and scope of our experience has exponentially just So we have no modern myth. We have like myth is has been used traditionally to like, oh, this is how like my world I'm born into. This is how it's structured. This is where I fit in. You know, the myths are like they read as a curriculum to life, basically. We don't have any myths that apply anymore. So we're certainly in this like liminal free fall of just like, how do we engage with this new environment that has absolutely, it feels like we're divorced from the natural world, even though our technology is a result of, you know, plugging into like these, you know, this natural like frequency and charge, and like everything that is around us is technically naturally derived.
Right.
It's just is so foreign.
Even
you know?
like even plastics, like
Right.
the whole idea of like recycle or else it's gonna end up on the earth and then cause disruption, which it will, but eventually like it will degrade over time and get re-established, reintegrated into the earth, and it came from the earth. So I don't know, it's like us as humans, we're like do good and like recycle, which is good, but it's so temporary for the grand scheme of like how old the earth is, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a funny topic to like kind of segue into.
Yeah.
Just like this is something I always like try to battle with talking to certain people, is I've realized in general terms, a lot of people are very narrow-minded about like the human experience, and they think that we are just like the all most important thing ever.
Right.
And
like an anthropocentric.
yeah, I just feel like as we grow up, what we get taught in school is that humans are the best shit ever, and nothing compares to humankind, and there's nothing else out there that compares to us, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's just very like narrow-minded and naive to think that we're just like this epic thing, when in reality it's like, for example, UFOs have been recently by the and I've been a believer myself for a while, but the government's like, yeah, these are real. So it's like, okay, so there's beings that have technology that's way more advanced than us coming here. So how can we actually think that we're just like the best shit ever?
Totally. And that's actually where I think that ultimately is the true sickness, and the true like void between like us and spirit and connection to source. Because, and not only like, okay, beings that are, you know, alien, but intelligence that is here, that is all around us, that builds and sustains, that builds our earth and sustains us. We are expressions of this intelligence, this universal intelligence. We are not, you know, the overlords or the source of that intelligence, we think, right? And so I think that's ultimately like, right, like redefining what even is intelligence. How many expressions of like a problem solving, adapting. That's how I define intelligence. Problem solving, adapting, evolving force. How many ways can that find expression in the world around us? It's all around us. It's like, you know, and also a coexisting, thriving force. So like I think that forests are like one of the most intelligent manifestations on our earth. They are literally like, they are, yes, the lungs of our planet, but also like a complete harmonious like organism. And so that's interesting actually to think about, like how we have like a micro and then a macro. So like, and this is reflected too in our cities. Like we have an individual me and a you and a you, and then we have millions and millions of individuals that make up a city that in and of itself is an organism. Millions of trees and fungi and plants and animals that make up a giant that make up the earth. And like the earth is so it's
and it communicates,
right,
the network,
right? Yeah. Exactly.
I think people don't necessarily connect that, like, oh, we're actually a lot more similar to a forest than we think we are, because a forest, for example, doesn't necessarily communicate audibly.
Well, the way that we,
right, so we're just like, oh, well, I can't relate to that,
right,
so we must be better,
right? No,
or
totally.
It must not be the same.
That's so
and
true.
it's like, well, yeah, it's not the same, but also like we walk around and humans aren't all the same either.
Right.
So what makes them
Yeah.
any different? You know,
We are indebted to our forests.
yeah.
Like,
Without them, we're
Yeah.
nothing.
right. No, yeah. They filter the air that we breathe. They hold ancient wisdom and like genetic like richness that we're just like slashing. It's
really sad, honestly.
yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that.
But even that's a human. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Mhm.
What?
But even just the human centrism of like that's bad that's happening to the forest, like that's coming from the human perspective of like I feel a negative impulse because of that's happening with the forest. But like on nature's terms, like it's just happening, and it kind of like,
I don't agree with that.
well, it's killing life.
Mm-hmm.
And our belief structure is that killing life is bad, but there's also renewal in the killing of life.
Right.
Well, so I want to hit on this. So,
And I'm just reiterating, like, I'm coming at it from a different angle, and I understand, like, I'm probably not gonna be the populist ideal in this,
I understand.
but yeah, it's kind of tying in with the idea of like recycling and everything like that.
Yeah.
How it's just like our belief structure makes us, it guides our behaviors and thought processes on things that happen with our world.
So
And our world might not necessarily care.
The idea, the reason people say, you know, cutting forests down is bad is because without, like we were just saying, without trees being able to filter the air correctly, humans cannot sustain life, their own life, like human life. Like other animals might be able to live or whatever, but we cannot live in a certain scenario. So we're causing our environment to be uninhabitable for ourselves. However, to the plants, in your perspective, you are right. It doesn't matter what humans do. We could literally wipe trees off the face of the earth. We would all die, and then the earth would just over time recycle itself. Like the whole idea of the earth being sick and that we need to save the earth is actually wrong. We need to save humankind.
Exactly.
Because we're like you're saying, earth is like the macro organism, right? And we're just like a small cell on earth. And right now what we are doing is we are kind of like the coronavirus. We are just like wreaking havoc to this organism, and the climate change and all that is an effect to like balance out this.
It's a cause and effect.
Yeah, exactly.
And humans are the ones that place the belief
So
on that effect.
it's really more about humans changing their behaviors to elongate the human existence and not saving Earth, because Earth will be around for millions and millions of years, like no matter what we do, unless we I don't know, blow up the planet or something. I don't even know how we could do that, but
so I see. So to get to your point, you know, there is no optimal ecosystem, right? So I was talking recently to someone about this, and I definitely understand what you're saying, where like there's no value judgment really to like the preservation of an ecosystem. They're constantly evolving, and in fact, actually, death is necessary for renewal, as you mentioned. Yeah. Absolutely, forest fires are, as an example, are a timeless regeneration of and like flattening of an ecosystem with that ultimately results in
new life.
New life, regrowth, and you know, fertile ash and what have you. And actually, the more that we conserve and rage against those natural processes and checks and balances, you know, we have like the California forest fires, where that was like basically like mismanaged forest fire conservationism, where too much debris built up over time, over years and years and years, because they were actually like mitigating forest fires that would naturally occur. And so then like way too much
massive
burn.
Fires
right, exactly. So certainly it like death is necessary. I completely agree with you, and I completely understand that. I think what's important to make note of is that we, and like the expression that we just have to save ourselves, like that is also an anthropocentric expression. So that is a human-centric thought.
Right.
we do not, the universe, our earth is not human-centric. We are an expression. We are a participant. We are a child of this community. So
A child of many.
right, exactly.
Right.
So to destroy, like, to be okay with, like, just destroying to satiate our own, consumption, basically, that's its own beast, I think to restore balance is to restore balance, to restore an understanding that we can optimally live in harmony with this community, and that we ultimately, I think that our, like, true role that we are faced to evolve into as human beings is to be shepherds of life and gardeners of life, because we have that ability. We have the ability to say, like, this lives and this doesn't. That doesn't mean that correct use of power, you know what I mean? We're completely not doing that right now.
And when we think that we're doing a good service, it could in fact be the wrong thing to do. That's actually killing us, in effect, of, like, we're having this impact on nature and we think that it's helping it, but then somewhere along the lines later on it ends up negatively affecting us.
Totally.
So having the wisdom of, like, our conscious awareness of making decisions for nature, I think, is very important too.
Yeah, and knowing that, like, ultimately, like, our interests are shared in everything around us. And, if our home is healthy, if, like, our womb is healthy, the earth is a womb for life, like, then life wants to promote more life, like, and if we are against that and promoting death and promoting destruction without also promoting life, like, that's where the sickness lies.
Yeah. And I think one major component to this issue that I've always kind of battled with, because I feel like it kind of gets dark, is the whole just, like, human population issue, and that we can't self-regulate the human population because it's deemed unethical at this point. But every other species of animal can actually control, like, it's a more balanced amount of them, so they're not just, like, being in, like, we're an invasive species on this planet.
Basically.
There's way too many of us to, like, the ratio of humans to actual resources is not balanced anymore.
Right.
And it's going to get worse.
Well, there's also mismanagement of those
exactly.
resources,
So
right?
You have too many people plus mismanagement of limited resource, and that kind of just lends itself to problems. So,
well, and it's not even that there are our resources are becoming more and more limited because our practices with how we use them, which is just the marginal percent of people
living
that
in
can
excess.
Right, which we are part of that group. We are part of that demographic on a worldwide scale.
Yeah.
It's just excessive consumption, which is the name of the game with our capitalist model, right?
Right.
Consume to make profit, to consume again, and it's just.
Do you, by any chance, have any ideas as far as, like, what the solution to these issues are, like, with sustainability and environmentalism?
Yeah, I have started so I've certainly gone down the rabbit hole. Actually, I watched a video, like, 2 years ago about, like, how our natural resources are, like, basically what the lifespan of each resource is in comparison to how quickly we're using it.
Right.
And we're certainly nearing the expiration of a lot of those resources that our lifestyles are contingent upon, that take millions and millions of years to regenerate, right? When you watch something like that, like, you kind of enter a state of, like, what the fuck? Like, what?
Yeah, it's like existentialism starts to set in.
Yeah,
certainly. And not just existential, like, why are we here? Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, right. Yeah, exactly.
You question everything.
So I think that's where, for me, my spiritualism comes in. And, it is micro to macro to micro again. But to be so like, I can't fix it. I can't fucking fix it. Like, that is disempowering. That is never going to get you where you want to be. I can fix me, right? And I can resolve the issues and conflicts that are present and tangible and under my dominion. And so I've realized, and I think that once I do that, it will reflect outward to my community, to my circle, outward, and and like it will reflect, like the universe will receive me.
Without having to tell other people to do a certain thing or having like that dogmatic approach of
Exactly.
like, do this
and that
or
never
else.
works. No one wants to hear like you're a bad fucking person, which I've totally
that like cancel culture stuff, where you just because like that's the thing, if someone doesn't believe or their belief system is incorrect and you know that to be true, like factually, not just opinion based, but like factually it's like you were wrong. You can't get someone to see your side by belittling them, because then you're just like talking at a brick wall.
Right. And no one, and that's just not effective. That's not persuasive.
Right.
So, learning how to like, and also, and this is actually something where this kind of comes way full circle back to like our reason for the podcast is that making these adjustments in our own sphere like accessible to people we're not geographically or, genetically, related to, where, we have access to them usually. But that's what's beautiful about this platform is like me speaking my truth as it is mine might inspire, and I hope will inspire, that reflection within others. And not coming from that dogmatic, like really aggressive approach of like, you're flawed for the way that you've been conditioned, because it's conditioning. We're born into this society, and that not to say that we're not responsible for like waking up out of it, but it's heavy shit,
Yeah, it's not necessarily like, especially stuff that you live your first, because I feel like up until maybe, I don't know, like high school is really when you start to kind of get a grasp of like thinking for yourself. And
if you're afforded that freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
And some other people, it's even longer before they get to that point where they actually have developed the ability to like think for themselves. And just telling someone that they're wrong, it's like, well, you got to educate them in a way. I just think some people don't spend the time to learn how to communicate correctly, and they just kind of word vomit at people thinking like it's gonna save the world. It's like, yo, nah.
Right. And ultimately I've realized totally personally that that's an expression of my ego, and that's an expression of my wanting to, I don't have control over myself, so I'm trying to like,
instead of accepting the way that it is, accepting that person for their values, even if they don't value environmentalism, that you still like give them the love.
Loving them where they're at.
Because maybe the reason that they don't believe in environmentalism is out of ignorance. And the ability to think for yourself has a lot of like confidence and security of oneself associated with that. So if they are insecure, and on top of that we're putting them in a place of fear, then that could create even more resentments towards the other side, or towards like the ideals that you're striving for, and then it creates even more like disconnect of the two.
I went to school for communication, and one thing I learned is that the best way to convey an idea and have it be receptive is by positioning it in a way that the person almost feels like it was their idea.
Yeah, exactly. And coming through the back door.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And some people might say, well, that's like manipulation. It's like, to a degree, but manipulation doesn't necessarily have to have a bad connotation to it. If you're spreading a good idea, it can be used in a bad way, obviously. But
no, I think that that's just innately like, that's human psychology, and that in and of itself is kind of an expression of the ego too. Like, to have to feel like it's my idea. That's where also, I know I've been working on being, more vulnerable and receptive to, interactions where I don't feel like I know what I'm talking about, and I don't have any preconceived notions of whatever it is. Whereas previously I'd turn it off, and so that it's Right. But if you're working with people who aren't in that space to be as receptive, totally making it
Right.
you make it their decision. You make it consensual.
Yeah.
Instead of like, this is what you need to know. And they're like, fuck you. Like,
right.
I don't need to know shit, you know?
Yeah. It's tough. Communication is tough. And I would say it's more likely that the person you're talking to about said topic is going to be like that and not necessarily open-minded to like all perspectives and like, ooh, you know, I may not necessarily agree with it, but I'm going to let you talk to me about it. I'm not going to be like disagreeable about it. We'll like have a conversation.
And that's like a skill set in itself. Like you have the skill set of open-mindedness and seeing that macro picture, that macro landscape of things, whereas other people might not be as well equipped with that too.
Certainly, yeah, absolutely. And allowing, I know just last night we kind of experienced that, but you know, when we're disallowing of that differentiation of perspective, right? And it's like, but you got to see it like how I see it, and then it creates this conflict, right? And so I certainly have been in so many countless situations where I'm like, my intentions are to share, but I just am like, you know, because I can, incorrect use of power, like, because I can voice my feelings in a certain way that's like really overt and other people can't. And so then they're just like, I don't want to talk to you, you know? Like,
I have the same issue. And like, I think that just the fact that you're conscious of it and that you're willing to work on it is you're already on the right track. Like other people have years before they're going to get to just the point of accepting that they need to like, maybe they're like, if I'm having all these like conflicts with people,
right, maybe it's not just them.
Maybe I should look inward and realize that maybe it's something I'm doing.
Right.
Like, am I being too blunt? Am I not talking in a correct, like I do that. Like I'm just very direct and I don't beat around the bush. And some people take that as very like aggressive and it puts them off and they just shut down. They don't care what I'm saying, even if it's like, even if it's something interest. Just, exactly. So it's just learning how to read the room, really. Yeah. Which is not easy.
No, it's not. And I think ultimately, and I was going to say this earlier, but knowing that if, and this is an expression of my spirituality too, but like our struggles are meant for us. So if there's a conflict that is present, like there's something to be learned from that exchange, and not just on one end, you know what I mean? And I've realized that, like, if I really want to ascend and reach a place where like I am able to, you know, feel lighter and brighter and more loving with myself and with others, like it's to see when the conflict is mine to have and is a lesson for me, and the struggles are ours to have on a micro level and also on a macro level. And that's where, you know, I've started to release like the like these things are meant to happen. It's like really painful and it's traumatic, and I'm not to invalidate anyone's suffering or experience, but like this is a detoxifying of age-old sickness, you know, and perspective, and like and it's painful, and that sort of flushing out is never easy, is never clean.
Right. Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
That kind of hits on like the Buddhist principle of like, well, trying to get an understanding of where you I'm gonna say something and then just like wondering what your thoughts are on that. But like the Buddhist principle of life is suffering, like coming at a place of like accepting that life has the worst of the worst in it. And then because we're able to accept the worst of the worst, then we're able to approach life with that love and acceptance. Because like if you're striving for a certain belief set, or like on a simple note, like we value positivity. So if you're constantly striving for that positivity, then it puts you in a place where any sort of suffering in life, you totally rejecting. And then you're not, like you said, confronting those conflicts and then trying to make resolve with it. So, just speaking my mind about that and trying to get an understanding of like where your beliefs are on the whole Buddhist principles of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've certainly heard that aspect of Buddhist philosophy. I am not the most familiar with Buddhism in general, but I suppose I subscribe to like balance is key and intrinsic to all of our experience. So when there is a shift, either towards positive or negative aspect of life, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So karmic response. So I think when there's conflict present in my life, it's not so much that I think like, oh, this is just my life. It's that I respond to it as like, what is this an equal and opposite reaction to? How have I manifested this in my life?
Yeah.
Right. And
trying to observe it just as it is.
right. And allowing it and looking at it in all of its sides and then being like, oh, this is where, okay, yeah, I see myself reflected in this conflict and I see how I pushed and it pushed back. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
that's so important too, because I think most people kind of just emotionally react to something happening and they see it as like a foreign thing that's unattached to them. And they're like, why is this happening to me? Why me? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you can't control that because it's already happening. So, but you can learn from it, like you're saying. So like being able to observe it, like take note of maybe an action that you realize afterwards, like that's probably what caused that, or at least that portion of it.
right.
Yeah. And just trying not to repeat that.
Totally. Yeah. And also going back to communication, actually you met Kyle last night. He is, I'd love to have him in the future on my podcast because he's done a lot of, I guess, academic training with communication. He worked for like a very specific summer camp that founded this communicational philosophy. And it's basically like, I don't remember the name of like the foundation as a whole, but like clean versus dirty communication. And we construct dirty communication is when you construct a victim villain. Like innately,
an us and them type of mentality.
Right, exactly. And then you express fully within that structure. That is your whole perspective. Clean communication is when you state your needs as they are. You receive, without constructing that victim villain. Like this is what I need in this moment. This is how I feel. Not that this is what you're making me feel or whatever. There are a lot of other like nuances and intricacies to this philosophy, but those two principles are really what stuck with me in all the times that he shared it with me. And then you realize like how many people live their lives under the shelter of a victim villain construct. Yes, right?
100%.
Right. And it's so disempowering. Like it's so limiting, and it doesn't reflect like the nature of our experience whatsoever. We are all interconnected. And
so looking at this like a cause and effect relationship of like we have this mindset of like the victim villain thing. What do you think has caused that to happen with our society?
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, certainly I immediately thought of like feudal systems, which are just an expression of the overt use of power to, domain against or over, like the few to domain over the masses. That's existed for, who knows how long in terms of like the human experience.
And it still kind of is with like
of
real
course.
Estate.
Oh,
yeah. It just turns into something else.
Right, of course, yeah. So in that case, like there is a victim and there is a villain, and that's not to say that there is validity to someone who's being oppressed and victimized, and to someone who is doing the oppressing. There are certainly examples of that abound in our current, modern experience and all throughout history. And I think what it comes down to is like thinking that the victim because that's really what's most important, is like the experience of the victim, to think that you have no power. You submit your power to another, to an oppressing force. In history, the masses are the victims, right? That submit their power. We see that now, the workforce. Like, we have all the power.
Yeah,
there's
all the fucking power. Of us than that.
Right. We have all the fucking power, but we have no ability. We have no understanding of that, really. And then we have made no, familiarity with, like, communication and like I can't think of the word, but basically, like,
because that's
aligning
what binds
our
us.
right.
And if we don't have communication, right, then it just will dismantle.
Right. We have no way to align our efforts. Yeah. And in fact, we've been pitted against each other through devices like racism, honestly. Right. Like, you and you guys are different colors, so you're going to fucking, like, fight each other and generations and generations, and think that there's some moral, difference between one another. But
meanwhile,
I'm still sitting rich.
Exactly.
Like,
it's like, we see, we're convinced that some group of people or whatever are the enemy, when the real enemy is the person telling us that they're the enemy.
Exactly.
And it's like, you're just saying that because you don't want us mad at you.
Right. Right. To see that, right. To take our power back. Exactly.
Which is a huge power tactic.
Yeah.
It causes
kind of genius,
and it causes chaos.
It is.
It's mass manipulation.
And it's so effective.
And it's worked for forever.
In so many different ways and stages. Yeah. So
I don't necessarily know if there's a solution to that, only because there's so many people. It would be very, very difficult to get every person like on the same page about, like, how to just deal with that. Yeah. But I do think with technology where it is and where it's going, with podcasting and just the intake of information, that a way to, I guess, combat that and kind of try to push it back a little bit, is just having more open-minded conversations with people. Whether or not at the end of the day you agree on anything, it's more just gaining that like sense of perspective and understanding where that person's coming from and why they believe what they believe.
Totally. Yeah. And reinstilling that sense of relationship to self-education. And instead of being educated by the state that seeks to oppress us.
Exactly.
So, which we have more access than ever before to that information and to
unlimited.
To that self-actualization. We just got to seek it. And so.
And it's a cultural shift too. That's what I think is really interesting. Is that, like, this is, like, the first time, I think, in history where we have this, like, mass amount of information at our fingertips and being able to access that. And, like, this is kind of like a rebellion or revolt of some sort, where, like, we have the ability of personal development and to, like, see through all of the, like, smoke and mirrors of what we've been told our whole lives for centuries,
Exactly.
And I think there is a shift.
There is.
And I think, like, you were talking about how, like, technology is a way of dissociating from reality, but, like, in this sense, it's actually, like, integrating us to our sense of self if we use it as a tool,
right,
and not to our demise,
right. And that moderation key. Is always
exactly
the name of the game. Yeah.
And the to hit on what you were saying, living in a capitalist society, if not, like, the, like, model of capitalism, we use that tool to perpetuate consumption and not necessarily the correct consumption.
Right, because and that's where we don't have any, like, mythic model today. So, like, we're just, like, we're like, oh, cool, yeah, I'll take the poison. Like, yeah, I don't, like with our relationship to technology has been used largely to psychologically manipulate and advance the interests of that capitalist model.
Right.
Because we have no preconceived relationship with this technology.
And I think it's because a lot of our society is still stuck in the consumer mindset of consuming content rather than creating content.
Right. That's so true. I love that you made that distinction. Thank you. Because I know I often feel so trapped and limited by my relationship to consumption, whether it be media, food, literally anything. Just, like, I just need to, like, put stuff in my body to, like, numb and satiate what I'm actually avoiding, which is creation.
And that's empowering.
Right. to be able to like know, yes.
Yeah, and that I was gonna say is one of the biggest issues, and I think tackling that micro issue, well, it's a macro issue because it affects everyone, but like it's a small portion of like the bigger issue is like self-control, and people are not aware that they're not in control of their decision making, and they just
or maybe they are, but they're just completely invested in that aspect, that habit, that you know what I mean.
And it's not a conscious thing. It's not something that we were educated on, and nor does the power structure that we have want us to be educated on this.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, we've learned since birth, if you were born in America, like that it's not a bad thing to buy stuff, to buy the new clothes, and like the fashion's gonna change in a year only because that means that you're gonna buy more stuff. But being like, it's okay to not like play in that all the time. Like it's okay if you want to consume. I'm not gonna tell you it's bad, but also like it's okay to not at the same time.
And part of that is also understanding that we have. I was reading about this. I think this morning, yesterday, something like that. But it was like our relationship with our with this earthly plane and with our survival minds. And our survival minds want us to consume, right? Because that's like, in order to get to this place where we are thriving enough to, you know, produce food and you know, feed billions of people, and then right, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're like completely blew the top off of that, right?
Yeah.
But that required a survival egoic mind of like consume so that I can promote my offspring, and that I, you know what I mean? So now that we are no longer guided, or now that survival mind is no longer relevant to the context under which we live in excess. You know, a horse will eat itself to death, like survival mind, right? And so we're grappling with this, like with our spirit and with our physical form, and we're trying to like.
And our egos are like with Maslow's, for instance, like you're talking about self-actualization and how there's like levels to it. It's like with every level there is, I think it's still contained within ego. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely. We can't divorce our ego. Yeah.
So it's like we have this like dichotomy now where we're like pursuing ego with personal development, and that's great and all. Like it's allowing us to create and provide more resources for society, but it's also like pairing that up with a spirituality. So do you see it as almost like two differences, like personal development in this like reality in this physical world, and then there's the spirituality, which is like the metaphysical development, and like what's your relationship with that concept?
I think
that's a big topic.
Yeah,
but
yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I think that we are the marriage of both material and spirit in our experiences. And actually that's what I wish I had the text that I was reading, because I haven't fully integrated it, and there was a lot of like ancient mythic philosophical names that they were using for like this earthly plane and like the spirit. I think they were using a lot of Egyptian myth, but basically how instead of thinking of earth as purgatory, we are condensed light, basically, right? Like condensed frequency and vibration, and that's what makes like it's fucking crazy, but like
yeah,
and that this is actually like where we're trying to be, but we got to learn how to like take care of it, and we have to learn how to balance the scales and how to garden, you know, and shepherd the garden, and that's what it comes back to. Like I really think that humankind's innate nature is shepherd and to guide. We just have to learn how to fill that role within ourselves. So that being said, like they're not separate, metaphysical spirit and our material physical reality. We are the absolute and potentially optimal marriage of those two experiences. And our ego is our avatar. you know, and like, and it's good. Like, we need our ego to sustain life, to, you know, guide us through a potentially very dangerous, you know, and compromising world and experience. But just like with everything, moderation is key.
Yeah, I see like the school of thought and spirituality realm or community where they kind of like discount the ego and they kind of like demonize it.
Totally.
And I think that could actually be pretty toxic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. No, it's a balance. Yeah. And I actually, there's this YouTuber, his name is Your Mate Tom. Are you guys familiar? No. He does a lot of like drug education, and he's had his channel for a while, but he specifically has done a few like guided ayahuasca ceremony in Peru. And his most recent, which when I started watching him actually at the start of like COVID, and I guess so maybe this was like a year and a half ago, he did ayahuasca and he tried to kill himself. And yeah, it was like, wow, completely altered the trajectory of his relationship, obviously, with his experience, his universe, and drugs and substances.
Now, is that like touching on the idea of ego death?
Right. So he talks a lot about his videos are so well done and so informative in terms of our relationship with psychedelics, both, you know, well, they're never really casual, but casual and extreme, like ayahuasca. And how even when he has this really cool term that he coined, is pseudo spiritualism. So like this ego death, and thinking that we can, you know, within our earthly form, we can, you know, surmount the physical experience and just rise above. And like, once you have an experience like that, like
reach enlightenment.
Right. and he's basically like,
which is weird because it's like an ego driven thing.
Exactly. And that's what he points out. And he's
that's
like,
the irony of it.
Right. And he's like, how can you have like, who is experiencing the ego death? Your ego. Like, right. Like, you know, and he's like, and that's like the interesting nature of the, you know, like this psychological identity that is the ego, is always trying to like establish itself. It's always trying to establish itself. Even if it's like, oh, now I have died. Like now I am risen. Now, you know what I mean? Like now I'm enlightened. Yeah.
So I've always battled with the idea of like reaching it. Like Kyle and I talked about this a lot for a while. And then I think we kind of both came to like an agreement about it, and we just kind of stopped. Is like,
no more ego talk.
What was that neither one of us ever wants to reach enlightenment because it sounds really boring. Like, what's the point of living if you've reached that point? Right. Because then you're not trying to like be anyone or anything. You're just, you just are. And then it's like, might as well just be like, I don't know, a rock at that point. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just want to put my 2 cents in.
Yeah.
Go for it. You're speaking on my behalf. But I think enlightenment is a good experience to have, but it's not like an end all be all. Like there's like monk school of thoughts where it's like that's the whole like the journey and the destination. What's that phrase? Like the destination, I don't know, but like it's not like something you travel to or you journey to and then that's it and then you're done. It's just like this constant process of integration, disassociating, bringing back the wisdom and trying to reintegrate it back into society. So it's like a balance of like we were talking about, being in the physical reality and making things happen in society, whether it's like services, skill sets, ideas, conversation, and then it's like going into the spirit world and then like having those revelations and insights, and then how you're saying trying to bind those two things together because they are.
Absolutely. Totally. And I think also, you know, the allowing aspect of what enlightenment offers is completely beneficial to our relationship with our environment, with ourselves and with each other, is like just this like just be and to allow.
It's no doing. It's just sitting.
Right. And not just even like, oh, then there's nothing. Like there's everything. But just to allow it and to not try and like, you know, put it in a box and then like look at it, you know, but just like damn, like,
And if it happens, it happens.
yeah, right.
And that's like the ironic thing about it.
Yeah.
Is to achieve it is like the opposite of achieving.
Yeah. Well, yeah, totally. Right. And then to achieve it and be like, oh, I achieved it. You know, and actually there's
which would be like an ego thing,
right,
yeah.
to take
right.
that like trophy of which,
right.
So I think like what I was trying to get at is like I think it's more about the process of getting there, but not necessarily reaching it.
Right.
Exactly.
Because like if you set a goal and you reach it, well, you're just naturally going to set another goal, something bigger. It's always got to be
right. And that's the question is like, can you even reach it?
Right. And how do you know that
right.
you've reached it?
Right.
What is the like?
Right.
What is the standard?
The value.
Oh,
totally.
Yeah. And to kind of like make it into a practical form to understand it, it's kind of like podcasting, for instance. It's just the process of doing the podcast. Like, yeah, you have the mini achievements of like, oh, we hit 100 podcasts, but it's a never-ending, constant thing, and it's like always new and exciting.
Yeah, and that's why, and so like reaching it, and that's it. It's like, well, then what? If you've reached it, then is there anything else?
Right. What else is there? Yeah, it kind of reminds me of there's this Sioux shaman. He lives up in Plattsburgh where I used to live, and his name's Jeff. And yeah,
shout out to Jeff.
Yeah, he is absolutely amazing. Jeff Cochran. He's in his 60s, I think, and he's just like he doesn't call himself a shaman, but I do, and he's a complete like balance between masculine, feminine, I think, material and spirit. And he certainly struggles with his own human conflict, but he's a poet too, and he's a master woodworker. He makes like totem poles, and
nice.
Yeah, he's an amazing person. I'd love for him to come visit and do like a totem workshop or something.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
You got to podcast him.
Yeah, I would love to, and I think he'd love that too. It'd be interesting trying to get him, like, because if once you have a conversation with Jeff, he's just like a flood of truth, but like a flood nonetheless. And so it'd be interesting
how to corral it.
Right, exactly. But with one of the things that he said is basically like, you know, like you have a flower, and then you're like, hey guys, like come look at this flower, and it's like, just be with the flower, just like just be. And I've always perceived that as like the most, you know, perceptively casual but also like monumental moments of like enlightenment, an expression of enlightenment, of just like allowing like your relationship with the universe, and with that that laneway, that circuit of just like, oh wow, I see you, and in you I see me, and that's it.
It's a very interesting concept, just like the idea that we as humans constantly want to share our experiences with others in that moment, instead of like we spend more time trying to show other people what we're experiencing than actually experiencing it. Especially with technology, people, you look at a concert or whatever, and everyone's just got their phone out,
right?
And it's like, do you care more about like showing this to people who didn't pay to go there,
right,
as opposed to enjoying the fact that you paid to be there?
And then there lies like the infinite devices that we use to remove ourselves from being present, whether it be like, oh, this is gonna be great for my, you know, social media identity, or whether it be like, you know, what's the next thing I'm gonna do, what's the next thing I'm gonna eat, like, you know, who's the next person I'm gonna talk to, like, just infinitely we're always like,
there's so many stimulus is happening.
Right.
I'm so guilty of that.
Everyone is. Absolutely.
It's tough.
Yeah, whether it be past or present, or past or future, we're never actually like grounded in the present. I'm not,
at least not completely.
Right.
And with your podcast, just to tie that in with this conversation, like I love how you guys are approaching it from a place of like not an authority on whatever you're talking about, but that like you're in the journey just as much as the person listening to it.
That's exactly.
And a knowledge share.
Yeah.
But also backing it up with source of information.
Exactly.
Because there's too much of this, like, it's like, oh, well, these political analysts are going to talk, but they're not going to actually like reference any of their knowledge. They're just saying shit.
Right. Making claims that are absolutely,
it's like, okay, so I'm going to listen to Assumption Hour with these three analysts, as opposed to like you actually giving me a lesson that makes sense.
Yeah.
And is empirical.
Absolutely.
and human.
Yeah,
Human.
absolutely. Yeah.
Because like, yeah, you can't claim you know something without there being reference to other people claiming the same thing.
Right. And I'll be honest, I've totally done that because I can put my words, I can string them confidently. So I've certainly
I've definitely
right,
done that.
right. So this is also a challenge for me personally to rise to the claims that I'm making, both like presently, but also the claims that I'm making to my future. Like, okay, what are you gonna fucking do about it? You know?
Right.
Like being accountable for what you're talking
Exactly.
about.
Yeah,
In.
and that just kind of inherently allows yourself to avoid the situation where now someone who listens to your podcast isn't questioning your perspective on it, because it's like, oh, well, they actually like did all this research, so I feel more inclined to believe it, as opposed to being more disagreeable about it, because it's like, well, I don't really know your expertise in this area, and you're just saying this stuff very confidently.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah. We think it'd be cool to do like a book club model, kind of, where like, okay, this is the text that we're currently, next week we'll have read this far, and like then we'll be reflecting on whatever.
That's cool. Because then people who are listening could also be reading that text along. And that's actually really good for just engagement too, just getting more people feeling like they're connected to it, as opposed to just a consumer watching.
Right. And they're benefiting from that journey as well.
That always goes such a far way with people.
Maybe that's like the solution to the whole power struggle that we have in society, is that we don't have any more authority figures. We get to a place of like sustainability of some sort, where our whole society has enough to distribute like our resources for basic needs or whatever. Like everyone is on equal playing field, and then we can all just like be coexisting and on our own like individual journeys, but we're all in this like macro journey, and there's no one at the top like enforcing that we need to be doing or living a certain way.
Totally. Right. And that kind of comes back to this specialization, right? That like is so necessary, and like your version of things, your interest, your passion absolutely does not have to, and probably should not, match that of another, if you're being true to yourself.
Right.
And that just, and what I really look to is like natural law to substantiate my beliefs, both like spiritually and otherwise. Like if I can see it reflected in like literally the building blocks of my experience, like, okay, then it's probably pretty true,
Yeah.
Can you just further explain natural law, what that's about?
Yeah. So like I perceive like that's a term that I use, but any phenomena that is like resoundingly present in my natural experience and what I've observed and what I can see is empirically observed, that to me is like how I derive the rules and regulations of my belief system, if that makes sense. So
not believing other people just because they said it, but that you actually experience that firsthand.
Perhaps, but also based on like, I mean, I certainly haven't experienced like, looking at a cell and all of its organelles firsthand, but I know that that's like, abound, like that is those are the basic structures of life. And I know that, and basically that's what specialization is having like a cell, a group. A cell is like a contained organ or whatever, and then having like a multitude of different specializing organelles within that space that are all operating a completely separate but connected function, and that creates like a system that can then.
This is kind of similar to like what Gary Vee talks about with like how he runs his business. He's like, I could be a video editor and film and do all these like different things to function my business, but I'm most valuable in this one particular part of it. So I'd rather just surround myself with people who can fulfill those other specializations so that I can focus on mine.
Totally.
Like stay in your lane.
Right. Which then just frees your time.
Right.
to focus on that, and you have more time
Right.
outside of that because you're more of a master at that. So
Mhm.
you're not spending as much time needing to like practice as
Right.
much.
And not that you shouldn't feel like limited to that one lane or
Right.
scope, but just that, you know, yeah, that it's not us against the world, you know, and that what we have to offer, what we feel inclined to and gravitated towards is absolutely necessary. And like the universe is calling you to fill that, to specialize in that, and it will, however it will benefit.
So to piggyback off this idea, do you have any guidance or ideas for people as far as, because like what you're talking about is finding your authentic self,
Mhm.
essentially, in the self-actualization.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe explain like your relationship with your own journey, and then maybe like how other people can get on their own journey.
Totally, yeah. So I was raised very unorthodox. My dad is a practicing pagan, druidic pagan. Yeah, so I have, and I've been exposed to numerous expressions of spirituality throughout my life. Both, say born again Christian, Old Testament Judeo-Christian, just so many different, that's just personally,
Mhm.
as well as others. And now, my dad is a practicing pagan and has been for probably maybe 8 years now. So I was allowed a lot of freedom of expression and exposure to alternative pathways since I was young. So it's never really been like a far reach for me to just engage with the natural world in a way that is like really authentic and spiritual. So I do want to just acknowledge that that is not a roadblock that I've ever had to get over or surmount. But yeah, I find most of my my purpose and my recalibration happens in a natural setting, when I am allowing that observation of timeless, maybe timeless isn't the right word, but observation of life as it happens in cycles, completely independent of our human experience. So sometimes what I feel inclined to do is just go sit in a natural space and just sit there. Just sit there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just and that to me helps me bring in this macro scope, which then it makes me feel connected, and it makes me feel like the absolute surety of life, that it just continues, and that it just continues on, and it's beautiful, and it's fractal, and it's tangible, is and any of the conflict that I feel like I'm completely entrenched in, I'm just damn, it's valid, certainly, but also, yeah.
What's the word for that? There's a philosophical ideology behind that, but just staring up into space and just realizing how small you are in comparison to everything, it kind of puts you at ease with the existentialism.
Yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question. I feel like I went on a tangent, but
maybe in a spiritual realm it answers the question, but on a practical to-do list, or how you would approach life in this physical reality, could you maybe give us some insight into how to achieve this freedom of self?
Well, it's hard for me to isolate any of my perspective or experience from my spiritual perspective, because I am constantly gleaning symbols and continuity within my life. Like I think it's like food for my soul. It just keeps me going, you know. So I absolutely love patterns, and I'm a very like pattern oriented person, both visually and
which is hard because it's intuitive in nature. So it's just like really hard to pinpoint and communicate how it makes sense. But it does.
But it does. And I think that's what's beautiful is that like also, you know, you don't have to explain it. And it's nice when someone receives that. I've certainly like been like, oh shit, like this sign happened and it means a lot to me. And some people are like, woo, and other people are like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like it comes in like that's your relationship with the universe. And so establishing like if something like if it moves you in whatever small way, like lean into that, you know, and start to see where there are patterns and start to link, you know, those moments of meaning. And they'll continue to reoccur, and they'll like just whether it be a placebo, you know, manifestation, which cool, that's pretty cool, you know, like if that's what you want to define it as, or whether it be the universe actually communicating with you, which is what I perceive it as. And it's fun. It's like really fun to interact and play with your life like that. And to it's like an Easter egg hunt kind of.
So I think to answer what you're seeking for, so a lot of the people we talk to are kind of like up and coming into their craft or whatever, and we try to seek out like, well, where did that journey begin? Like what was the shift, and like what things were you doing to get yourself there? And I think you kind of explained that you kind of have had an advantage of sorts by being born into an environment that is accepting of just being who you are, and there's no like you got to be this. I expect you to be a doctor when you grow up. And blah, blah, you know, as Eastern culture in some areas kind of perpetuates onto their offspring.
Well, it's Eastern. It's like Asians that come to America.
Right.
It's not. I don't know if that's necessarily like an Asian culture thing. Who knows? But
well, I mean, it happens in America too. There's a sense of like, oh, well, our family is a prestigious family, and if you don't amount to like what we did, then you suck or whatever. And it's like so you're always those people are. There's a lot of people constantly living with like the fear of being like rejected by their family unit or whatever, so they have to be someone they're not to make everyone else happy. And reaching that point of realizing that it's like, well, you only get to live once, and say your parents, for example, like they're not going to be around when you're their age, and you're still going to have to like go about your business, and like they're not going to be around to reject you if you will. So it's like why care about it?
I think it's interesting you point that out for me too, because like, and I have conceptualized this a few times, but that might be why that question was so difficult, because I've never, like when I dropped out, I went to college because I wanted to, not because my parents expected of me. And then when I dropped out, like they were like okay. And that's just one example. So I've never had to like form my whims in my life to some external, you know, expectation like that. Whether it be the immediacy of my parents or, you know, the more ambiguous expectation of society. I've always been pretty like broken of that. But I was thinking like with my art, I certainly have learned, like when I was in school, I learned, you know, great composition is repetition with variation. I certainly know how to make an art piece that will sell because it's kitschy and it looks good. You know what I mean? Like I know how to like trigger those points of satisfaction in a viewer. It took me a while, because then I was just creating for that sense. For some external audience. It took me a while up until very recently to like maybe within the last year or two, especially as a tattoo artist. There's certainly a relationship there of like expectation, which is inherent, but to reestablish my relationship with creation as authentically mine and not based on, well, will this sell? You know, even if I'm not fucking selling it, which I don't think I've ever really sold a piece, like a painting, just because I don't know how to market myself. But
that's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not. But reestablishing my relationship with creation and with the universe, so it has meaning. Like everything I do has meaning, just because I invest into that relationship, and I look for it. And I feel more validated than I ever have in my life because I prioritize that relationship. So I think that's what, in a roundabout way, what I was kind of getting at is like, in your endeavors, if you're looking for meaning, if you're looking to find your place in your space of like authenticity, just whatever feels important, prioritize that, ceremonialize it. Like, make it, fucking drape it however you want. That makes you feel fancy and it makes you feel good. Like, and then it'll just continue. It'll just evolve and snowball, and like you'll just feel more confident, and you will find a greater voice within that exploration, and things will fall into place.
Yeah, I think an important aspect of that is really just the idea that other people's opinions or expectations of you, I mean, they are a thing, and I don't think it is helpful to completely ignore, because you're going to have to interact with those people.
Certainly.
But not giving it as much power as you think it has.
Right.
Is really like the key to allowing yourself to open those doors and really start grabbing at things that you thought like, oh, well, I could never do that, or I'm never going to be that. It's like, well, why not? Because Joe Schmo, who's sitting on their couch, like swiping on Instagram, told you so. Like, who cares? Like, do it.
Totally.
Even if it's like not great at first. There's it's hard. It's interesting because like back in the day, people were more on that survival mindset, like you were saying, that and that's kind of like how society was going. So people weren't as necessarily going about their artistic endeavors as much. It just was, this is like a byproduct of the fact that our society allows like leisure now, leisure activity. I can go learn a sport, play golf, whatever.
Right.
So it's very new concept to lean into that, and
which might be a signal showing how far society has come to allow us to pursue our own individuality.
Yeah.
Because like on the individual level, it's super meaningful. Like it literally gives you life to pursue your authentic self. But on a sociological level, well, like sociologically, it like allows a more freer society if the individual is free, like the micro influences the macro. But in terms of like a society that is trying to, especially with capitalism, how we're trying to generate and create on a large mass scale, there is that sort of like, you have to be a cog in the system. You have to serve for that function. It's a specialization, but it's a specialization in the sense of like, you're a factory worker and you're doing the same thing over and over again to allow the business owner to be able to mass scale some product. But like now we're moving into the shift where it's like, we're still specializing in one thing, which is yourself now, but like you are in a sense the owner of that factory, if that makes sense, and your factory being your authenticity.
Certainly. Yeah. And I absolutely see what you're saying. I also don't to prioritize the evolution of and the personal journey of one's authentic self. I don't think is to divorce the your connection to others and your connection to, you know, society or culture as a whole. I think if anything, like there is, and I saw this recently, Sonia Renee Taylor, she's an amazing activist and speaker, and she was saying how like there is no loss. Like the scarcity mindset of like, if someone pursues their truth, there's no loss in someone pursuing their most authentic self. There's only to be gained. And that's where like we're adjusting culturally to that mindset. And that scarcity is a product of capitalism.
Right.
But now we're moving into a new generation of capitalism, I think, where it's creating more abundance. Like, I know capitalism gets a bad name, especially if you're talking about humanitarianism. But like, in a weird sense, like 50 years ago, maybe we were just too early in capitalism. And now we're getting to the point where it's shifting, where capitalism allows us to have a system that provides sustainability in our resources because of how much abundance is created. And now, as an individual, you're able to pursue. And you also have platforms like social media, which was a product of capitalism, to now pursue that individuality.
Yeah.
I mean, capitalism inherently created the avenues of like taking art, which people have been doing art for forever, but I don't know if necessarily, like, let's go way, way back, you know, centuries and centuries ago, like they were doing art because it was like a commodity and they were like, oh, I need to sell this or whatever. So it's just interesting because like you can be an artist and not necessarily care about selling it. It's just more the idea that it's like you can be a painter and like that's okay. Like that's what you're bringing to society. It's a perspective to share.
Yeah.
But
And
people
I think
are afraid to even get to that point of being like, I can do that.
Yeah. And I find that like the real breakdown is our lack of relationship with our intuition, and with our more shadowy subconscious knowledge and self. And that is not a relationship that has ever been, in recent societal context, has not been promoted. And that is a relationship that actually a lot of indigenous cultures have, that intuitive relationship to source, that to me is what really calls me. And so I feel like that's maybe the most daunting thing, is it's like, you mean you're not going to tell me how to create? You mean you're not going to, you know, like, you mean I got to like reach into that abyss and find it for myself? Like, right? Like,
yeah, it's definitely
go
scary.
into the unknown.
Yeah.
Well, in that's kind of a byproduct of how we were brought, you know, most of our realities have been since birth is like someone else is telling you how it's going to be,
right,
what you're going to do,
right,
and
which isn't, not to say that that's
to an extent
that's
it's
beneficial right.
to get you to like understand your basic functions, but to some extent having that ability to have the environment of kind of figuring some stuff out for yourself at a younger age, it's just going to follow you. Like the way I see it is like, for example, like talking about like investing into your like financial future. If you start investing at a younger age, it's going to compound over time and you're going to have way more money when you're retirement age if you started investing at 12 as opposed to 30. So the same idea, I feel like the sooner you start thinking for yourself and kind of reaching into like, how do I become a painter? How do I become a filmer? Like whatever, the more advanced you're going to be in by that age, whatever.
Right. And then like, what am I trying to say about my experience? How am I trying to share, you know, and right, exactly. And being able to access like those like deeper reaches of experience that ultimately not only like, I know I need like, and I'm coming from like, I haven't created in a long time because I've been avoiding those intuitive places, and I've instead been like, you know, plugging into other manifestations because of, you know, like we're all experiencing a collective trauma right now with coronavirus. So I've been kind of like, I don't really want to open up that box. It's a little scary right now. So that's okay too. But you know, I've started to approach my creation as a way to unbox and unpack all of what I like store away, and then once that like sifting has gone through, what can be said after that? How can I move forward?
So, given that you said that, what form or what medium of expression allows you to pursue that authenticity in yourself? Best.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on like what's needed. I think right now I need to write. I love writing, and it does help me work through these really like nuanced and like weighty psychological, conflicts that I will just carry around with me for Lord knows how long. And so yeah, I'm basically at a place right now where I just have not made time for myself. Like I'll just give it away. I'll just not even give it, because that implies that I'm like doing a service. Like I need to prioritize myself. I need to make space and honor myself.
Yeah.
But I
totally get, I mean, granted, like I feel like I've, in a weird way, this period of time has actually benefited me like so much, but I can't necessarily say it's the same for everyone else. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are not having the same moment in time as I am, but I don't know, it's especially living here, like it's very easy to just be like, oh, there's people around, I'm just gonna hang out with them, and next thing I know it's like 2 a.m. and I have done nothing with that free time that I had. And that eats at me, because like I always live by the fact that like there is no expectation for me to do anything. I mean, I could literally delete my Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, and just disappear from like the majority of people that like watch anything I put out there, and after a while they probably just like forget, and because no one actually cares if I make something or not. I'm just me doing my thing. And so
I would say I'm sure there are people that care.
Well, yeah, but like
I see what you're saying. You don't abide by
I don't allow any pressure of someone saying like, oh, well, why did you make it this way? It should be this way because I would like it better. It's like, well, I don't care. I just like, it's more about my own expectation of myself that I battle with. So that's what's been interesting, is a lot of I haven't been this creative until I moved here. So it's interesting having that while also having other people around you, and just learning how to balance balancing your time. And this is a perfect time to do that, because we have way more time available to us, because a lot of people aren't working, or like, whatever your situation is, it's just not what we're used to.
Absolutely.
It's kind of chaotic, but in a fun way. It's kind of, I don't know, it's like a fun challenge to develop yourself and be prepared for when things do kind of shift back to a normalcy of sorts. How are you going to function then when there's way less time to do stuff?
And I like how you put it as a challenge. You're not specifying that it's a problem. It's just like the way it is, and you're just navigating it. It
comes back to like that villain victim mindset. I don't see coronavirus as like some bad shit that's happening to me. It just is, and I'm learning how to adapt to it. But I'm also understanding that like this isn't going to be forever, so I also need to be prepared for what comes after it, because there's an importance to being in the moment and like adapting to that situation, but things are always changing, so just always being on your toes and not just like becoming complacent with, oh well, this is how it's going to be now, and then when shit changes and you're not prepared for it, you get like knocked over. So I just don't want to be knocked over, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that adaptation to a new environment and circumstance is hallmark of the human experience, of the earthly experience. That's what we do. So yeah, it's always been a struggle for me, like making space for myself, and then once I am okay, I am by myself, I have everything at my disposal to connect to myself, and then I just find another device, to numb and to deflect that relationship. So I'm all too aware of that, and I'm continually trying to rage against that relationship and addiction to distraction and consumption.
I think it's important though to know that like wherever you are in that process is totally fine. You know, like everyone's in a different spectrum of where, you know, wherever you lie, like it's okay to be there. But being conscious of where you are and where you want to be is like that's
all you can do.
The only way.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really valuable point.
And I think it's like understanding why you are having these behaviors and like the psychology behind of it. And I guess that's the question, like why is that happening? Like granted we have coronavirus happening and that's definitely putting a damper on things obviously, but like I think it would be beneficial maybe delving into that a little bit and just for other people, because I'm sure people listening on here are on the journey of like personal development stuff and they get hung up on stuff like all humans do. So yeah, do you want to go into a little bit of your own psychology of
Sure, like what I think the source of that reluctance yeah. Well, I think it goes back to my relationship with my mom, actually. And she displays and has always displayed like an inability to make an honor space for herself and honor her creative and individualistic pursuits. You know, she had my oldest sister when she was 19, so she definitely like totally sacrificed her identity for my sisters and I, for her children, and which is incumbent upon a mother, but also at some point it becomes like her own relationship with self. So I've certainly just by proxy like accommodated those behaviors, and I see that now, and I'm certain, and it's always been something that I struggled with. Actually, Cassandra and I, she's talked to me about attached versus avoidant personality types, and both of these behavioral manifestations are expressions of usually childhood trauma or whatever. I'm certainly attached, so I will definitely like seek external engagement or validation to supply that which I
Makes
don't
you feel good,
right, and that which I don't give myself or whatever. Like I'll go to that first, and so I have never really developed a very strong relationship with myself, and in fact it's scary for me to be alone sometimes and just be like, even though like I'm great, like what's so scary about it? But it's just that I just have never greased those gears, and I've always lived with people. I've always been in very busy and dynamic living situations with many people. So just like with the gear factory, I mean, the place I lived previously I lived with 6 of my best friends, and so just plug into them, like,
which, I mean, honestly though, that's totally fine because humans are social by nature. So it's kind of like, but
right. Well, there's
that differentiation between the two.
Right. And that's where it's just out of balance, because then I feel like I need to be alone. I need to honor myself. I need to fill my own cup and then be full and brimming and have so much to offer and bring. But I'm not making that space. So then it creates contention for me, both within myself and then outwardly manifested.
It's interesting though, because like you were talking about your background and like your parents giving you that freedom of expression, and then that's like something you're battling with now.
Yeah, I think it's I've always been able to express myself. It's just that I'm not able to like sequester myself, if that makes sense.
What's that word mean?
Sequester means to like bring into like willpower,
like control your behavior on
right? Yeah, self-restraint, willpower, And so actually that's probably, my parents never really required that of me, to be honest. There was always a lot of freedom. I mean, I smoked weed with my parents the first time.
Wow.
When I was, probably shouldn't say how old I was. But yeah, it was like, you know, like my dad, when I was 8, I mean, he was growing weed medicinally, and he like took my sisters and I out and showed us like which ones were the females and which were the males, and like all of the little like, you know, the flowers and the little frosty tips, and like, so that being said, I had a very unorthodox relationship with my parents, very peer based, which was both really great, but has also proven to wield certain, you know, conflicts throughout, you know, throughout our lives, and that's okay. But yeah, so I've never had like this authoritarian presence over me, so I certainly wouldn't inflict that on myself, you know what I mean? I never had to, I was never subject to a god. I was never, you know, like, I've always had a very free form relationship with my creations. Like, yeah, and I think that's part of why, like, yeah, like I don't sell art, or I don't like push myself in this really like, you know, rigid way, right?
It's just interesting because like you say authoritative, but like in your case maybe a little bit of that would have been good. So
exactly.
Yeah. Well, that comes back, it's just like a balance thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like too much authoritarian background can really like it's super traumatic, and then on the opposite,
too much peer,
it's not necessarily traumatic that there was no freedom.
Right.
Hold on. This loves living in Syracuse. Yeah, but then like there, so it's
absolutely.
But one nice thing about that, though, I mean, not saying that you're necessarily going to have kids, but like if you ever did, it's a nice thing to be conscious of, because you can try to avoid
recorrect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
I feel like it's the whole idea is that you try to recreate, like try to take the good parts of what your parents did and then try to improve upon that.
Absolutely.
Generation over generation, you try to.
That's the whole thing, is
some of the bad stuff.
Right. Yeah. Healing generational and ancestral trauma.
Yeah.
Which is certainly
and then we try to make those changes, and then it leads to other things that are viewed negatively.
You're right.
Well, so I mean, like, just you're innately not going to be perfect.
Right.
And
exactly.
Plus, like, being a parent is
fucking hard.
Yeah. No matter how you're parenting, it's not going to be easy.
No. Yeah, for sure.
Well, kids are, shitheads sometimes.
Right.
So you just gotta like deal with that.
Right. And that's where, like, my parents are great, and I have come to a place where I'm not reflecting on what brought me here, which I think that was a really valuable question, but certainly not victimizing myself and villainizing them for, like, you weren't hard enough on me, or I don't know, whatever that would, and there are definitely darker manifestations of that dynamic that my family were still dealing with, but I am my own person, and now I'm at a place where, like, I can take my power back, and it's not easy, and it never was, it never will be, but the struggle is mine to have, and I can do it, and so it's just about doing it, and it helps to have conversations like these.
For sure.
Yeah, and to be around people that inspire me to create, and
yeah. I mean, I think that's probably like the biggest reason I moved here. I don't know if that's the same for you guys, but like just the idea that other people are creating something, kind of just being in that space would help spark my own creativity in whatever way.
Yeah.
Because, like, I think innately humans are creators.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people kind of get subjected to societal norms and don't create anything, and they just consume, and they just are kind of like a sheep to what everyone else is doing. So, like, tapping into that individuality and self,
So, to touch, like, piggyback off of the individuality, I'm curious, and I'm trying to figure this out on my own, but why is individuality important for, like, society at large?
I think that goes back to the specialization, personally, where like we all have a valuable role to fill and provide for like the system and the cognition of the system at large. And if we were all doing the same thing or thinking the same way, we wouldn't have that spectrum and scope of problem solving or perspective or whatever it is.
Definitely.
to like drive the system forward and to continue to like, and not even that's shown in evolution, you know, like the you know, variety of DNA sequence that provides, you know, like X number of genes that provides, you know, like, you know, X number of manifestations that then like, okay, this one is more effective than this in this context, and now we have, you know, this species has evolved.
Like, say if everyone thought the same way and there was like a problem that occurred and you have to find the solution, but everyone's doing the same like tactic to try to get to that solution, but it's not working. They're just going to keep doing that because no one else is saying, well, maybe we should do it this way. I thought about this idea. And they're like, oh shit, yeah, maybe we should. So yeah, that nuance allows for a solution to like whatever to come a lot easier, less of a struggle, I guess. But it also takes the ability to like accept those perspectives to get to those solutions.
And it like allows communities to be formed.
Yeah.
That I think on an authentic level for the individual becomes more meaningful. So it's like the specialization creates like these pockets of meaning in society, maybe.
Yeah, and I think that's, and I don't know if this is true or not, but like I personally believe that humans were meant to be a part of smaller communities, not these very condensed, large scale things that are ruled by, you know, a few people. Like just the idea of, you know, a few handful of people, maybe like 100 people in charge of millions and millions of people, and just in this country alone to be the sample size. It's like, that's outrageous. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think this localized approach is the ultimate like resolution to our political crisis. You know, there's an absolute discrepancy of like we are not represented by our politicians and by the people that are in government right now at large whatsoever. And in fact, we have to like completely diminish our values for some asinine system.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Right, which is like but that's just how it is, you know. And
yeah,
but taking back our power, you know, engaging in this democratic system, which is flawed but is not is flawed but is also functioning. So what we can do is repair the system as it stands, right? So to engage what and I will not claim to be the most politically educated person. I certainly am not, and that is something that I hope to just continue to resolve. But having a more localized approach to the people that I'm politically advocating, and to like the matters that affect like here and now in our local community in Syracuse and New York State. Like I think that's the best way I can move forward. And if anyone would like to challenge me on that, please, because I'm willing to open my perspective.
I definitely agree with that, because you look at, Syracuse is a perfect example. So Syracuse is a Rust Belt city. So at one time, about 100 years ago, Syracuse was one of the most populous and booming economies in the United States. And then, you know, when salt stopped being a necessary, like the way we had salt here stopped being a necessary function, and there was a better way to do it, Syracuse kind of became obsolete. And so that was kind of a function of like our greater government, not
Mm-hmm.
like the local government kind of moving resources somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
which negatively affects here. And
Mhm.
as you're saying, like we're not represented
Mhm.
correctly, even
Mhm.
by people who are supposed to be representing our state.
Mhm.
So it's really like if you can tackle the micro, those piling of micro things will lead to a more macro change.
Right, exactly.
And like that's why I think it's ridiculous to think that a few hundred people who are in the federal government are going to be able to represent millions of people when they probably haven't even stepped foot in like Arkansas or New York. Some people probably haven't even come here. So it's just like how am I supposed to know that you're gonna do good by me when you don't even know what it's like to live in my shoes or like what our community is like going through. And that's
a good point.
It's just there's so many moving parts when it comes to this, especially with the idea of like big business having money in the pockets of politicians. So it's like, oh, so you care more about this business than you do like the majority of people that are the consumer. Because like without us, there is no economy. So I don't know why you're choosing. It's like, why are you choosing them when like we're probably more important than that business? That
they got the money.
Yeah, well, that's I think the fundamental issue in the capitalist society is that money speaks, and unfortunately that's a flaw because that makes more people unheard and not cared for.
Right. Well, individuals are expendable. Ultimately, they're an expendable numbers. Resource, right? Exactly. Which is, we see that expressed in so much, and
And I think that's man, I don't know if I want to bring this up because it's kind of bleak. But like talking about individuality, as an artist or creative, it can be very sad. Like, what's the best word? It can be very sad to go down that journey because it's lonely. And if society at large doesn't value the values that you try to uphold and try to personify, then it's like very easily that individual can get discounted. So I think speaking on that, it's important maybe for the person going down individuality to find their tribe and to find others that are inspired by individuality and have that value. Just because on a mental health level, like it can alleviate a lot of negative feelings. And I think that's what the Gear Factory is allowing and providing for us to not feel alone.
I think so too. It's really a unique little habitat we have here.
Yeah, and it's definitely gone through its growing pains for sure. But at the same time, what's nice is that we've been allowed to kind of form it into what it can be. But it's an ever-changing environment.
Truly, yeah.
Because if Rick, who owns the building, for people who are listening, if he just came in and said, this is how it's going to work here, like, this is what you can and can't do, there's like a set of rules. I mean, he has obviously like the obvious rules about like living in a building, but like he's not telling us like how we have to be.
No.
Like, it's just an open platform to like, if you want to go collab with someone upstairs or even in the basement, like which I haven't even taken advantage of the fact that there's plenty more people in here than just the ones living here.
Right. I think that's what he wants, though. That's part of his vision, is that complete like amorphous space without any like,
can be whatever.
Right. Exactly. And it's such an opportunity. It's beautiful, honestly, and I think this is like, I count myself really lucky to have that my life has brought me to such a place of connection and diverse interpretation and expression, and I'm just a part of that, and it's like nice.
Yeah. And it, at least for me, it's allowed me to realize like I'm more aware of the fact that I constantly like want to be around people and do stuff and be like stimulated by like something happening or talking to someone. But it's allowed me to like register that and then be like, okay, well, I can just like slip back into my little layer here and just like be by myself for a while and battle that. Yeah, it's interesting because it's similar to like a college like setting, but at the same time, we're not all here for the same reason.
Right. And it's completely like without any of those rules or regulations.
Right.
And obviously we have such a diverse group of people from all walks of life and ages. And
that's key too.
Yeah, totally.
The diversity here is insane. Like maybe not necessarily like by like a racial standpoint, but definitely by like an age and background. And like art form or whatever thing that allowed them to live here.
Certainly.
It's very interesting.
Certainly. Yeah.
And it's like that specialization that you're talking about. Like we have a carpenter here, we have tattoo artists, we have entrepreneurs, we have, you know, filmmakers. Like it's insane to be around such different things.
Right. And then to be like situated on the art corridor. And I really feel like art is such a healing practice for cities specifically and for urban areas. Like I'm really interested in murals, and I can't wait to get into my own expression of that. But basically, like I think Syracuse could benefit so much from just this like resurgence of really intentional creative output. I mean, every time I go visit Ithaca, I'm just like, oh my, like the heart of this city is just like, you know. So I'm really excited to be like kind of on the forefront of what's possible in this artistic hub and community, and how we can like reach out into the community and benefit.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think just by you starting this podcast, it's going to help the resurgence, just bringing spirituality into our presence
Wow.
in the present moment.
Yeah, wow. Thank you.
So, because I feel like we've talked a lot about bigger picture ideas, but I kind of want to bring this back to you since you are, you know, kind of like the highlight of this is, I don't know, just talk a little bit about like the art you're doing. So outside of the podcast, but just like art stuff you're working on, and like maybe like how you got into doing that particular style of art and stuff. I'm just interested to know a little bit more about like your art forms.
Well, I just got a studio down on the first floor with Cam, so that was really nice. So I've really been focusing on most presently just getting my spaces like kosher for the creative work that I will be doing, which is always something that's been really important to me. It's amazing having like a dedicated studio space. I've never had that. I've always just been like in my room or so. Yeah, my art forms. I'm usually attracted to painting, so I usually use acrylic as my medium. I used to draw a lot more, but I think ultimately, like the continuity under all of my creative work is its purpose, and within that purpose, like how will it perform on its own without like after I've created it. And ultimately, like I like really low maintenance materials. So paper is really high maintenance. You have to frame it. You have to make sure like it degrades after time, and that's just not super interesting to me. Even though the effects you can get with paper, I view it a little more as like a means to an end, a way to hash out ideas before I actually get them down. So what I've started doing most recently with painting specifically is using materials that are already available to me and not necessarily building a new canvas, building a new frame. I'm constantly looking to integrate kind of a recycled approach to my art. So that's felt really good and purposeful. And then like with murals, I'm actually doing a mural right now. I just started working for Scratch Bakehouse. Nice. So I'm going to be doing a mural inside, but that's a little bit, I've never quite done something like this, but in the future I'd like to, I like that a mural is publicly available and accessible, no matter your class, your ethnicity, no matter your stature in life. Like you can appreciate whatever, you know, is put on a public building. And I also really enjoy the reintegration of structures that would otherwise be kind of dull, or I'm sorry, I like my brain's like that would otherwise be like wouldn't reflect the community that it lies within. I really like that concept of just like re-empowering the community and its structures by just tagging them in a way that's like really relevant and celebratory.
Makes them enjoy like the space in which they live.
Exactly. And that reflects like the diversity of the community. It makes it colorful, makes it bright, makes just there's just so much joy to be had in that that avenue of expression.
And I think that's something Syracuse needs too.
Absolutely.
Just a sense of pride of living here.
Exactly.
Yeah, for the longest time, it was such a negative. I know, like growing up, just always hearing people kind of down talking what Syracuse is, and focusing on the negatives, but like realizing, I think it's important to realize like the negatives that happen here happen everywhere. Like it's not unique to Syracuse.
Totally. That's such an important concept. And that goes, you know, like the grass is greener. It's like my mom always used to say, wherever you are or wherever you go, there you are. So, right. And it's right. So we can always project to some idyllic elsewhere, but it's like,
there's those problems are going to be there too. Sure. It's like, oh, you don't like the homeless people here? Well, there's homeless people in the other city you're going to move to. So like,
and honestly, Syracuse is pretty awesome. Like it's
very cool.
It is really cool.
A lot of history.
There's a lot of history, and there's a lot here, and there's a lot of opportunity, and I feel really so thankful and appreciative of that opportunity that just lies, and it's just like, what are you gonna do with it? Like, it's really exciting for me personally.
And I feel like it's pretty tight knit. So I think that's like the divide actually. Like people who say like, oh, Syracuse doesn't have much. It's because when you're living in Syracuse, you kind of have to search for it. But once you find it, then you're like, oh, this is my community. You know,
like we met we met Drew Shoup because he prints all of our merchandise, and once we met him, we kind of just inadvertently met like his network, which happens to be like the greater like entrepreneurial artist community of Syracuse, because he's doing his cool shit, so he meets all these people, and we were like, oh wow, there's actually like a really cool, you know, network of people doing cool stuff in Syracuse that doesn't always necessarily get the notoriety or attention from people, but it's like it's happening. It's definitely a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we've met some very spiritual-minded people too, so we could refer them to you for your podcast.
Oh, that'd be great.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like Ariel.
Yeah, there's definitely a handful of people that have been on our podcast that would definitely do like, because like ours is a little bit more personal about like, you know, what you're doing physically, but they definitely had those themes in their story.
Absolutely. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, and going back to like what I'm doing personally in terms of my art is I'm really trying to, and that's also like with the Little Room, the initiative. For me, what is so impactful and like attractive about what the Little Room offers potentially is that integration with community, and so I'm trying to like manifest my artwork outward into like creating meaning personally, like via my art. Like I've approached my painting as very ceremonial, so I've been doing it on like the full moons usually, which is really empowering. But so that's like a personal manifestation, but then also like through mural work or even like with tattooing, like that's a very democratic and intimate process artistically that is unlike any other. So like to mark someone permanently on their body is ultimately like it's paramount that their needs are met within that dynamic and within that experience. But also that like I almost consider myself like as a shaman kind of in that context, and that I am delivering, you know, an emotional, physical and spiritual, you know, manifestation of what their needs are. Tattoos aren't always like, they don't always carry that weight of intentionality, but I'm definitely moving to a place more and more where my art is very like rich with that intention and with that sort of expression. So,
and I just want to point out that you said that you're not doing much in the capacity that you might be wanting to, because you were saying how like you have freedom of expression, but the maybe rigidness might be lacking. But like you are doing stuff. Like you have tattooing, you're painting, you're doing this mural, you're starting a podcast. Like, that's something to be proud of.
It's very. It's funny because like I definitely fall into that too. Just like you reach a level of like creation that you feel like, but I could do more.
Yeah, like I feel like I should be drawing every day. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Like I've never been very good at maintaining practice.
Yeah.
So I can do like and then it's like, oh shit, there's a thing, you know, and like, but it's almost far and few between. And I've never been good at like waking up and having this is not only practice but meditation. You know.
So maybe like here at the Gear Factory, that'd be something good for you to like maybe start a group in to just hold yourself accountable. Just be like, oh, from 9 to 10, like I'm just gonna sit here and draw. Everyone's welcome to join me, but this is what I'm doing.
I guess that's kind of like what the Creative Cradle is. Which for anyone listening, her name is Mila. She lives on the 5th floor. She kind of started this group that is just like an open platform for us creatives to either talk about like what we're doing or to do work sessions, but that kind of gives you some incentive to do so, especially if you like being around people, that stimulus. But
I think the difference here is like what Mila is starting is more like therapeutic.
Yes.
We can talk about it, but like I think we need a group actually to be doing something.
More just accountability group,
like a study hall.
Yeah, honestly. And we've done that a few times up on the 5th floor. Actually, Mila had like, you know, like the banker's lamps with like the green, and it felt, and she put it on like the dining table, and it felt like a library. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good idea. And I think that would be a really good way to integrate like my habitual tendencies and also what I'm trying to integrate further.
It's funny because like the idea of like having those lights out and that I had to work from home permanently in my previous job like when coronavirus started, and I realized really quickly how unmotivated I was to do my job because I was just in here alone. And on top of that, there was a handful of people that were jobless at the time, so they're all creating cool stuff or doing whatever, and I'm like in here doing something I'm not necessarily like hyped on. But when I was in the office, just being around other people doing their jobs, it made me feel like I was a part of something, and it made me motivated. So like now that I have a new job and I'm working in an office downtown again, I realize like, oh, like I need that. I need to be around other people doing stuff to feel like I can get some stuff done. Not all the time, but it's nice to have that for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because then like, you know, someone's like working hard and you're like mess around your phone, you might look around and be like, oh, maybe I should like get back to it, or someone might say something, you know, hold me accountable to like do my job.
Certainly. Yeah, and that absolutely has been a part of it too, you know, with COVID and lockdown. And you know, I only just got a job at Scratch Bakehouse recently, so I've just been in this like free fall with my time and my space for 9 months, something like that.
It feels like 10 years.
Yeah. for 1,000 years. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, maybe that's what you need. Maybe that
structure.
Maybe just that getting you out of the building for a bit, and then you come back and you have that new like appreciation for where you live.
Yep, and that's already proven true. Where like even appreciation for my time, and now that it's more scarce, I'm like, okay, this XYZ is what I'm gonna do and how I'm gonna do it. Yeah, so that's definitely been integral. And also, I've noticed now that all the days are dreary and gray. I've been doing overnight shifts, but I start to feel like around 6 p.m. when like I actually like being in my room because it's not just like gray light, you know, which is funny. So I've just noticed like since the season has changed and adjusted, where the fluctuations in my vibrations and frequencies energetically, and starting to like harmonize my efforts with those patterns, because like in the morning I just don't fucking want to do it because it's gray. It's it's like I don't know.
I get it. I totally get that.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah.
But over time you kind of develop your thing, like how to do it, or for me it was like showing up 5 minutes late consistently to work. I was like, all right, I gotta change something.
Yeah,
I gotta like wake up 30 minutes earlier if that means I'm gonna get to work on time. So it just takes time, but when you're out of it for 9 months or whatever, not because you wanted to, that just kind of puts a damper in everything. So
yeah, but it's good. These aren't even like larger conflicts, just reflecting on like what needs resolution and then like how to work towards that.
Yeah. And I think you got it figured out.
Thank you.
You'll definitely be fine.
Yeah.
There's definitely people who have a lot more like going on that hinders it. So
and speaking of time, we're a little over 2 hours. Just to like wrap up things, do you have anything that you wanted to specifically talk about that we haven't covered yet?
I feel like we talked about everything. You know what I mean? Yeah, sure. Like we just covered the whole gambit. That was great. It was very organic too. No, I think if anything, I'll just have me on for another episode.
Yeah. Or you have us on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we like to finish with a couple of things here. So I guess we'll start with this. I know like coronavirus is crazy and it makes things kind of unpredictable, but like where do you see yourself in the next like few years? Like what are you trying to accomplish in like the short term? Just with art and everything? Sure,
yeah. I would really like to further pursue my mural career and whatever that looks like, but I really want to inject like and offer what I can to my local community. That's very important to me, and I feel like I can offer that, and I can offer it like in a really beautiful and transformative way for local communities. It's interesting because in being here, I actually was going to move into like renovate a short bus and travel and tattoo right before I moved here into the gear, and I'm apprenticing with Picasso. So
nice.
He's a tattoo artist that lives on the 5th floor, and
he's been on the show.
So. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, perfect. So that was really for me. I need an apprenticeship. I'm by no means like as developed as I can be with tattooing. So then I really made that conscious choice to prioritize my artistic education and creative expansion, as opposed to, I had the money, I had the freedom to just like, I'm just going to go. So that choice was really like, I mean, it was the right choice, I think, but it was really formative in my trajectory. And now that, you know, I've signed a year lease and, you know, I don't really know how long I'm going to stay here. Like, I don't know, you know, but ultimately I know that while I am here, I really want to make as much of an impact as I possibly can in the ways that are afforded to me. So, engaging with the little room as much as possible. I really want to start. It's hard with COVID, obviously. Like, all of our efforts have just been like,
it's like, yeah, you can't really run an events
Yeah.
space when you
True.
can't have people to be in the space.
right,
Yeah.
or a community effort when we can't gather in any
Yeah.
regard. So,
It's
but kind of lining the
frustrating.
pavers, you know, and this is an incubation period. I think that
yes,
even though
skill
it's
building.
right, even though it's frustrating, we're downloading the foundation, you know,
Yeah.
to then fly. And so I'm just really prioritizing these living in such a communal space, these communal efforts, because ultimately at some point I do want to, you know, live in a very rural space. I want to build. Have you guys heard of earthships?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Super
yes.
interested in
Yes.
earthships and like cob building.
Mm.
So at some point, I've always been interested in communal living, and I hope to eventually start a commune. But I will remove myself from this urban area. So for now, I want to do everything that I can to just
While you're
like
here. Yeah.
right.
We had
That's
someone
awesome.
on the podcast that is interested in doing just that.
Nice.
We could get you connected with him.
Yeah.
He teaches yoga. His
Nice.
name's JP Goodman. He'd
Oh,
be a
yeah,
good
yeah.
person to interview.
That'd be great.
But-
Yeah.
Yeah. The Earthship concept is so awesome.
Oh yeah.
Just like more people need to be like educated on that existence
I
of
know.
it.
I know, absolutely. I think the founder, Michael, I don't remember his
I
last
think he
name.
was on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Michael Pollan.
No, Michael Pollan is an author. Yeah, he's a journalist. No, he's the founder of Earthship Building.
Like he created.
Yeah, he's
two
from New
concepts,
Mexico.
yeah.
Exactly,
Mhm.
yeah. But it's interesting. There's a few documentaries, and he talks about how what he started in the 70s. He started it with basically using just like cans, like aluminum, like Coke and like beer cans. And he said it was a contrived way to recycle, basically. And he just was like, yeah, I'm gonna start building with these. And then over time he was like, it's actually like these are waste materials are actually stronger and more durable
Because
than
it lasts so
right than the
Interesting.
materials that we actually manufacture to build.
Yeah.
And so he was just like, when I like
That's an awesome
Wow.
epiphany to have.
totally yeah. So people should know more.
Yeah.
It's all around us, and that's where I start to feel more empowered in our future and less like desolate and bleak,
Right.
because we just have to start implementing these devices of adaptation and using what we already have.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also technologies that we have no idea that will continue to surface, that will, you know, just begin to make our future just a little bit brighter.
Yeah.
So
So where can people find you, your art, whatever, if they want to,
sure,
you know, be more involved in like the stuff you're doing?
Yeah. So my art Instagram is extremely inactive. It's Chlobaso, which is CHLOBASO. But there's some cool shit on there. Like you can check it out. But yeah, I just don't post very often. That's my relationship with Instagram. I've tried to really dial it back. That way I can focus on my relationship with self a little bit more. And once I feel I have that on lock, then I'll be ready to share a bit more. That's about it.
So do you have a tentative plan for when your podcast might start?
Yeah. So I was hoping by like the 1st of the year or sometime around then.
Okay.
I feel like that's like a good amount of time to kind of collect where we want to start. I don't know exactly how long we'll be posting or how many iterations in a week or a month. We still have yet to really figure that out. We haven't put too much stress, you know, right, on like
Mhm.
the process, and kind of, I think what is most important is that we just familiarize ourselves with the process of putting out content. And then once, because neither of us are really that savvy, and then once that comfortability sets in, we'll be able to like streamline and
Right.
you know, so yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, definitely.
It's experimentation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
And there's no expectations. So
Right.
just, you know, figure it out over time. That's
exactly.
how we did. And we definitely weren't like pros at this on day one. So
Yeah. How long has it been now?
So the first episode of this iteration, like having someone on, was August of 2018.
Okay.
So it's been a little over 2 years.
And then with COVID, we kind of put everything on break for the past month.
Yeah.
So
right.
Yeah.
Well, even more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been less.
It's sporadic.
Yeah. It's more
Right.
sporadic when we can get someone who can actually come in or feels
Right.
comfortable. So
Right.
but that's always, I mean, whatever, you got to adapt to whatever situations are happening. But I mean, nonetheless, it's super cool that you getting involved in it, and it's gonna be really cool to like see where it goes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Kyle, do you wanna so we always ask this
Yeah.
question to end the podcast. So Kyle's gonna do his thing.
The weird deep kid. Talking about philosophy. Kind of cliche. But I think it's important to talk about. But the question is, what does it mean to be human?
To you, what's your perspective?
And we ask everyone this question, and we're just trying to find the themes based off of like what people say about that.
I think that's a really beautiful concept. Yeah, I think that we have a very unique and highly charged potential in our experience of like integrating spirit and material and being conscious of that integration. So as soon as you said that, I just thought of like the union, like the marriage coming together, and just knowing that that's what's happening, and reflecting, like that constant reflection of self. And ultimately the greatest challenge of being human is like, okay, now what do we do with that knowledge, with that reflection? Do we remain static? Do we, remain focused in this survival, violent, mind, or do we choose to adapt and evolve into a greater space of love, for ourselves and for the universe? So
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And very unique to that question too. So we appreciate your perspectives, and thank you for coming on episode 54. We'll be posting this in, I don't know, a week or so.
Yeah.
So
wow.
we'll let you know when it's all good. But
okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
3, 2, 1.
So there you have it. Thanks again for tuning in to Bindlism, a philosophy to self-sufficient lifestyle. Be sure to explore other episodes of Bindlism on our Spotify and Apple podcast. You can find more BOHO HOBO stuff on Instagram and Twitter at BOHO_HOBO_, as well as on our Facebook page at BOHO HOBO Lifestyle. It'd also be dope if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Our YouTube channel has more episodes from Bindlism in video form, along with other random shenanigans that we're up to. We're constantly filming new experiences, so it's one way you guys can stay up to date with us in our journey. So yeah, I guess that's it for now. Until next time, peace.